You're watching an amazing podcast from an amazing podcast company.
What's up, Mob Associates? Jimmy Naples here, Johnny Ciccatelli. We're back again with Youngstown Mob Talk Live. I just want to thank everybody for watching us out there. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel, Amazing Podcast Company on YouTube. And then also don't forget, you can find us anywhere you can get your podcasts, Amazon, Spotify, Apple, those places. So, Johnny, we've got something coming up here that we've been kind of percolating and working on for a while. Why don't you tell our audience what we've got coming up for them?
Yeah, so what you're about to hear is part one of an exclusive 5-part series. Over the next 5 episodes, we're going to be diving into something we call the Task Force Files. A while ago, Jim and I had some law enforcement documents from over 20 years ago that were leaked to us. And these were files that were never made public. They were from an organized crime task force from the Ohio Attorney General's office. And this task force was created in the late 90s and into the early 2000s. They investigated a lot of things, from a burglary ring to eventually unsolved mob murders. And, these files came into our possession, literally hundreds of documents, thousands of pages. We were, took our time sifting through it. We went through a lot of this information to see what exactly was there, and it was a lot. And, a lot of it solves some of these unsolved mob mysteries from Youngstown's past. So without further ado, we're going to share this with you now. Make sure you check back every couple weeks because parts 2 through 5 are coming after this. And, right now, this is part 1 of the Organized Crime Task Force Files. Leaked law enforcement documents, cold case mafia hits, and newly uncovered evidence that could potentially reverse a triple murder conviction. This is an exclusive 5-part series. The Organized Crime Task Force Files. Part 1. From burglars to murders. Who hit the hitman, Joe DeRose? The facts from this story were compiled from information contained within investigative task force files from the Ohio Attorney General's Organized Crime Investigation Commission. Included are details about crimes which have never been publicly released. These files were provided to us by a source who wishes to remain anonymous.
It was like they moved in slow motion, and you didn't even hear them. They were just standing there and they were pointing guns at us.
Have you ever had a gun pointed at you? Your car burned? Your house blown up? Could this happen in your town? Tonight, a town where it did happen. A town in fear of the mob. And a crusading sheriff who promised to fight the corruption. Mobtown, USA.
The city of Youngstown and the Mahoning Valley as a whole has a long history with organized crime, but it's been over a quarter century since the widely recognized end of the Mafia's control here. The city's final dawn, Pittsburgh Cosa Nostra capo Lenny Strollo, was convicted on murder and racketeering charges.
Lenny Strollo, Strollo.
But not before he flipped and turned state's witness, rolling over and testifying against his own lackeys and associates.
Well, I turned it on.
Following Youngstown's high-profile mob trials of the late 90s was the downfall of local Congressman James Traficant. The colorful representative had long been a white whale for eager FBI agents, still smarting from the time he took rival mob leaders' bribes as Mahoning County Sheriff's candidate. Admitted to it all on secret Mafia tape recordings, and then beat the case in court by representing himself no less. In the end, the feds got the last laugh, harpooning Traficant with a bribery and racketeering conviction in 2002, before he was eventually expelled from Congress and sent to prison for over 7 years.
I'm not unique. I know why I was targeted. The only American in history to beat him, and I was an embarrassment.
Fast forward over 2 decades later, and the only local mob stories to report, besides the occasional deaths of the few remaining wise guys, are when we take periodic strolls down memory lane to hold live event versions of our Youngstown Mob Talk show. From our first sellout show of 1,350 people at the Robbins Theater in 2023, to our public examination of the Cavallero bombing at Stamba Auditorium last November, and a masterclass with Master Burglar Emil Denzio in Warren this past February, we've been digging into the mob lore and searching for unearthed truths. It was in the process of that digging that we came across the basis of this story, an organized crime task force commissioned by the Ohio Attorney General's office from 1999 to 2004, which began looking into a ring of notorious burglars and ended up cracking some previously unsolved Mahoning Valley mob murders. This task force consisted of detectives and other members of law enforcement, mostly from outside the Mahoning Valley. This was right after the highly publicized trials of Lenny Strollo and his cronies, which implicated some local judges, the former Mahoning County prosecutor, and the county sheriff. Because of past complicity and involvement of local law enforcement, the Organized Crime Task Force excluded most local agencies in the Mahoning Valley to keep its integrity throughout their investigation. Our source explained that it was an exciting time, shrouded in secrecy. They detailed meetings which took place in a private office space atop the former Goodyear headquarters in Akron. We were told it felt like being in some sort of spy movie.
Over the next 5 parts of this story, you'll learn about various cases that the task force investigated, with lurid details that have never before been made public. You'll come across a plethora of wise guy nicknames to go with the colorful characters of the era. And you'll realize, if you hadn't already been aware, just how mobbed up the Mahoning Valley used to be. We'll begin with the murder of infamous hitman Joe DeRose Jr., who disappeared in 1981, and whose body, to this day, has never been found. It was reported decades ago that a man named Sam Fossesca was indicted for the killing back in 2002, but because he died before the trial ever started, the details of this case remain a mystery until now.
Here's what we knew about Joe DeRose Jr. going into all of this. He was a suspected hitman for the Carabia brothers, Ronnie, Charlie, and Orly, in the late 1970s. The Carabias themselves were local representatives of boss James Jack White Licavoli's organized crime family out of Cleveland. According to FBI affidavits, DeRose was believed to have murdered mob associates Charles Spider Grisham and James Peeps Canonico, who were allegedly aligned with John LaRocca's rival Pittsburgh clan, represented locally in Youngstown by Little Joey Naples and Two-Gun Jimmy Prado, a.k.a. Briar Hill Jimmy. This was all during a Mafia skirmish, supposedly over gambling territory. When Ronnie the Crab Carabia got jammed up, street slang for incarcerated, for blowing up the Irishman Danny Green in Cleveland, his sudden absence sent shockwaves through the Mahoning Valley's criminal underworld. The killings of Spider in 1978 and Peeps in 1979 were followed by the disappearance of Ronnie's brother, Charlie Crab, who, according to Lenny Strollo's 1999 testimony, was summoned to a meeting with the Pittsburgh crew but never returned. His car was found abandoned in Cuyahoga County in December of 1980. Not long before, DeRose and his girlfriend, Cheryl Durkin, were the victims of a failed assassination attempt. DeRose took a bullet to the forearm and another to the neck. Durkin absorbed one in the abdomen. Both survived.
It was like they moved in slow motion, and you didn't even hear them. They were just standing there and they were pointing guns at us.
In February of '81, DeRose's father was then shotgunned to death in the driveway of his Boardman Township home.
Joe DeRose Jr., the target of what federal agents call a gangland hit. But the wrong man is dead. DeRose's 61-year-old father mortally wounded by a single shotgun blast in the driveway of his Boardman home just before 8 last night. This morning, FBI agents and Boardman police combed wooded areas near the Deer Path Road home in a vain search for a weapon.
Mr. DeRose's son was the victim of an assault last May, and because of the murder last night, it appears as though there may be some connection between the two.
Police sources say DeRose had taken to changing cars several times a day. Those same sources link young DeRose to Orlando Carabia and his Crown Vending Company based here in Struthers. DeRose purportedly became a bodyguard for Orlando following the disappearance and apparent murder of his brother Charles Carabia last year. Boardman Police Chief James McBride said evidence found at the shooting scene indicated a wide-bore shotgun was used. The elder DeRose was found at the edge of his driveway, unconscious with a massive chest wound. He, according to McBride, was moving one of his son's cars, this 1978 Pontiac, at the time of the assault. DeRose is described as a law-abiding citizen who ran a local construction business, an innocent victim. The latest federal and local authorities believe in a series of area underworld killings dating back more than 4 years.
The 32-year-old Joe DeRose Jr. would go missing in April of that same year. Both he and Charlie Carabia were later legally declared dead. It all reads like the plotline in a Hollywood gangster saga.
We were also aware that in 1988, Cleveland Cosa Nostra underboss Angelo Leonardo testified on these killings before the U.S. Senate Permanent Subcommittee on Investigations. During his testimony, Leonardo told the senators that he was previously approached by a fellow gangster on behalf of one Skinny Sam. This Skinny Sam had been shot in what was believed to be a mob-sanctioned hit. Skinny Sam, through gangster emissary Pat Ferruccio, wanted to ask the Cleveland underboss if he, Sam, got rid of Joe DeRose. Would the mob drop their beef and let Sam live? In somewhat comical fashion, Leonardo testified that he had no idea who Skinny Sam was, but that he was well aware of Joe DeRose Jr. The aging mafioso recalled that by the time this conversation took place, both the Pittsburgh and Cleveland crime families wanted DeRose eliminated. So, Leonardo told his gangster pal Ferruccio to tell Skinny Sam yes. If Sam were to eliminate Joe DeRose Jr., any contract would come off his head. That Senate testimony occurred 14 full years before Skinny Sam Fossesca would be investigated by the State Attorney General's Organized Crime Task Force and eventually indicted for killing DeRose Jr. So how did this task force end up solving DeRose Jr.'s homicide? And were there more cases out there that we didn't know about? Our first step was trying our sources. After several years of working for local news station WKBN, as well as producing true crime podcasts like Crooked City, Youngstown Mob Talk, and The Vice Squad, Johnny and I have learned the importance of developing sources on both sides of the law. In this case, none of our existing contacts were any help, but the persistent nature of journalism finally led us to someone who could. A new source, one with knowledge, experience, and access to the Organized Crime Task Force investigation files. This source has asked for anonymity and provided us with hundreds of files containing thousands of pages from the task force investigation. It took a while to sift through everything, but when we were finished, we realized we had the information we were looking for, and then some.
In 1999, the Organized Crime Task Force was originally looking into a local burglary ring which had taken down nearly 200 known scores across Ohio, Pennsylvania, and Kentucky. It consisted of a handful of mob-connected professional burglars, who, along with over a dozen part-time accomplices, had been operating unabated throughout the 1990s. Some of the older members' criminal histories dated back much further. Youngstown has long been home to some of the best, if not the best, burglars in the entire country, going all the way back to the Crime Town USA days of the 1960s. As the task force plowed forward into the burglary ring probe, they realized these mob connections could lead them to other unsolved crimes, namely murder. Thus, the scope of this operation expanded into unsolved mafia killings. One of the members of the 90s burglary crew was Sam Fossesca, aka Skinny Sam. After realizing that many of the lower-tier associates had already cooperated with detectives, Sam and the other big fish of the burglary ring admitted their roles and agreed to plead guilty to various charges before giving detailed accounts of the scores they took down, all as part of proffer agreements with the state. Unfortunately for Skinny Sam, along the way, the task force detectives interrogated more than one person who said Sam killed Joe DeRose Jr. back in 1981. The turncoats included a former Mahoning County Sheriff's deputy, a family member of Sam's, and a longtime friend. It was the latter, Charles Treharn, whose statement was the most valuable to detectives. In a recorded interview on December 21, 2000, Treharn explained in great detail how he assisted Sam Fossesca, along with former Mahoning County Deputy Eddie Farris, with the planning of Joe DeRose Jr.'s execution, and the partial disposal of his body. According to Treharn, they took Joe out on a pretend stakeout of rival gangsters in Joey Naples' crew. DeRose and Fossesca were under orders from recently jailed Ronnie Carabia to eliminate Naples' entire crew. More on that in part 2 of this series.
Somewhere along the way, Fossesca had warned his friend DeRose that Naples' guys were going to strike him down first. That's what led to Fossesca getting shot and Angelo Leonardo eventually catching wind and testifying to the U.S. Senate about this Skinny Sam character.
39-year-old Sam Fossesca of South Turner Road in Canfield was walking into a building he recently purchased at 813 Catalina when shots were fired from a truck parked in an adjacent lot. Hit once, Fossesca fell to the ground and hid in shrubbery as 3 more shots ricocheted off a nearby van. Fossesca then crawled around the building and fled to Alameda, where an ambulance was summoned.
Police are investigating the possibility that the motive for this morning's shooting involves the victim's alleged racket associations and his ownership of a local vending machine company. Whether or not authorities are able to prove that the shooting was indeed an aborted hit remains to be seen. But the way one insider put it, it's clear something's up.
Fossesca told police the shots came from the rear of a pickup truck that was carrying bales of hay. Indication the suspects were prepared for the victim firing back. A well-known police figure, Fossesca has a long burglary record. After he was taken to St. Elizabeth's Hospital, Fossesca declined treatment for the gunshot wound. An investigation is continuing.
Because he had warned his buddy Joe DeRose that a preemptive hit was coming from Joey Naples' squad, Naples had his right-hand man, Ernie Biondello, set up Sam to be shot. Sam Fossesca confirmed this with the task force in his own interview.
Sam, who shot you?
Who shot me?
Yeah.
I have no idea.
Was it ever solved, or?
No.
Who you think shot you?
Who do I think? Well, story going around that I heard it was Ernie Biondello, but as to any proof to it, I never had any proof, so.
Why do you think he would do that?
Why? Well, he thought I was running my mouth about some things going around town, like warning people.
Warning people about him?
Warning people about some of them being shot at themselves.
And you had knowledge of that?
I had knowledge of it. Somewhat I did, yeah. It was like secondhand knowledge.
Who was the victim in that particular shooting?
Victim? I was the victim.
No, I thought you were warning people about somebody else that would have been shot.
Oh,
I think he meant you were warning people that they might get shot.
Oh, well, the outcome was Junior Senzarino and Joe DeRose. Those were the 2 that I was told that were going to be shot.
Okay.
If they don't watch what they were doing.
And who told you that?
Joey Naples.
Okay. And you were out warning people about that possibility? And that's why?
Well, I had mentioned it to someone who was close to Junior. And Junior, went and told Joe. I mean, it just, got to be, all around, the neighborhood, so to speak.
Okay, and so Ernie Biondello and Joey Naples were close. And Ernie took offense at the fact that you were out warning Joey's potential targets.
Right.
After taking a bullet in the buttocks, Sam got the message, then met with the man who ordered him shot in the first place. Joey Naples, like Big Angelo Leonardo, told Sam that the only way to get the contract off his head was to kill DeRose himself. So for Sam, it was kill or be killed. Treharn, in his statement to the task force, described the scenario as playing cat and mouse. Sam and Eddie Farris concocted a plan to poison DeRose. Treharn says they obtained strychnine from Lenny Strollo and were going to slip it in Joe's coffee. That was until Murphy's Law kicked in. If you're unfamiliar with the concept, it's whenever something can go wrong, it almost certainly will go wrong. One night, while still staking out some of the players on Joey Naples' crew, Joe DeRose, Sam Fossesca, Charlie Treharn, and Eddie Farris stopped for coffee at a convenience store. That's when Farris dropped the strychnine in DeRose's cup. Moments later, they were all back in the car when DeRose took a sip. The way Treharn remembers it, Joe spit it out immediately and threw the coffee cup out the window. Suddenly, the other guys became bumbling actors, pretending their coffee was bitter as well before tossing their cups out the window.
3 hours later, they made another stop, this time at Young's Diner in Ellsworth Township. Inside, Joe headed straight for the bathroom, while the others took a seat and nervously assessed the situation. Treharn says they were worried the coffee fiasco tipped DeRose off, and since that plan had failed, Fossesca decided he would have to shoot DeRose that night and get it over with. He asked Treharn to hand him a gun that they had stolen in a prior home burglary in Michigan, a 9mm Luger. Treharn slid it to Fossesca under the table just before DeRose emerged from the bathroom. If Joe suspected something was amiss, it was with Eddie Farris and Charlie Treharn, but not his pal, Skinny Sam. When the four called it a night and Fossesca asked DeRose for a ride home, Joe willingly obliged. He got behind the wheel of one of his other girlfriend's cars, and Sam hopped in the passenger side, sitting shotgun, while secretly armed with his stolen pistol. But Treharn and Farris didn't go their separate ways. They just kept their distance and followed far behind, tailing Joe and Sam on their way to Fossesca's house on South Turner Road in Canfield Township. The following is a direct quote from Treharn to the task force investigators on what happened next.
We could see Sam when we approached Sam's driveway, it being real long. About halfway up to the house, you could see a muzzle fire twice. Then the car accelerated real fast and went up to the barn, and the lights went off and shut off. Eddie and I followed up there, got out of the car. Sam got out. He had blood on him. Joe was slouched over in the driver's seat.
Afterwards came the cleanup. Charlie Treharn and Eddie Farris helped wrap DeRose's body up in a garbage bag and stuffed him into the trunk of his girlfriend's car while Sam wiped down the seat. Then they took the car and parked it, with DeRose's body still in the trunk, at an apartment complex in Austintown, where DeRose and Fossesca shared a hideout. And what about the gun? Treharn described how they disposed of it.
We drove to Meander Reservoir, which is Lepke Road. Sam had taken the gun apart, and we came across a little bridge where there's water running under the road. And he threw several parts of the gun on one side. Then we turned around, and he threw another part on the other side.
If you remember, as we stated earlier, Joe DeRose Jr.'s body was never found. That's because Fossesca, Treharn, and Farris ended up going back to the apartment complex in Austintown and moving it. They took the car from Austintown to Camel, parking it at 5th Street and Wilson Avenue, about a mile down the road from Joey Naples' Youngstown United Music Vending Company. Then they let the mobsters' crew know where to find the car and DeRose's remains. And that was that. Charlie Treharn never saw the vehicle again, at least not in person. The police would eventually find the burned-out 1976 Pontiac in Summit County. By that time, DeRose's body was gone, but Peninsula Police recovered a spent 9mm cartridge from the car.
Without a body, it's hard to prosecute someone for murder, even with an eyewitness testimony. But Charlie Treharn wasn't the only one who ratted out Skinny Sam. Eddie Farris had spilled the beans about his involvement in DeRose's murder to law enforcement. He even agreed to take a non-stipulated polygraph test, which investigators say he passed. Sam Fossesca, on the other hand, took a polygraph and is said to have failed. His cousin Lou Fossesca also gave the task force a statement, saying Sam admitted to him that he shot DeRose in the head. Lastly, Robert Dorler, a hitman and associate of both Fossesca and DeRose, was willing to testify about key details leading up to DeRose's death. The combination of those admissions was enough to bring a case against Sam Fossesca.
Unfortunately, for anyone looking for closure in the Joe DeRose murder, the case would never come to an actual conclusion. Sam Fossesca was indicted in Mahoning County on February 21, 2002, on charges of aggravated murder and murder, to which he pleaded not guilty, but no trial would ever take place. Fossesca, who was already incarcerated on burglary and gun charges, would subsequently become ill, and the case was delayed until his eventual death on August 8, 2004. Charles Treharn pleaded guilty to the murder of Joe DeRose Jr. in Mahoning County Common Pleas Court under an engaging in corrupt activity count. He received a 5-year sentence and was placed briefly in the Federal Witness Protection Program. He died on July 2, 2019. Eddie Farris was given immunity for his cooperation with authorities and died of natural causes in 2013.
Still to come in parts 2 through 5 of this series, The murder of Dominic Jr. Senzarino gets solved after 23 years. Investigators learn who dumped John Magda's body in the Struthers dump, and why the killing of mobbed-up fence and government snitch Rob Talbert was never prosecuted. Plus, newly uncovered evidence that could possibly help overturn a conviction in a notorious triple murder of a GM Lordstown security guard and his family.
That was an amazing podcast from an amazing podcast company. If you enjoyed the show, please click the like and subscribe buttons and share it with your friends. It goes a long way in helping us produce more amazing content.